Honorable Zheng Yongquan, President, WLFD, Republic of China Chapter. Dr. Huang Kuibo, Professor Zhengzhi University, Taipei, Taiwan. Honorary Judy Scurll, Member, House of Canada. Honorable Yana Martin, Member, Senate of Canada. Honorable Kira Rudik, Member of Ukrainian Parliament. Honorable Tina Rose Muna Barnes, Vice Speaker, Guan Legislature. Bruce Nuts, Executive Director, the Unitarian Universalist United Nations Office. Dr. Bozzato, Ambassador of Sovereign Order Malta to the Republic of Nauru. Good evening. President Yao has some other business engagement in Taitung and cannot attend our forum today. He also asked me to send his greetings to you all. Honorable Judy Scurll, Senator Yuna Martin, Honorable Kira Rudik, and Honorable Tina Ruth Mona Barnes will later join us virtually. I, David K.P. Liu, the Secretary General of WLFD, Republic of China, has the honor to once again be the moderator of today's forum on the theme of freedom, democracy, and rule of law. First of all, I want to thank you for your participation to make this event possible. The theme of today's forum, rule of law, seems to be a prerequisite of democracy and freedom. Democracy and freedom are interdependent. In short, there is no democracy and freedom if there is no rule of law. However, the connotation and denotation of the rule of law and the rule by law are tremendously different. The rule of law is a political philosophy that all citizens and institutions within a country, state, or community are accountable to the same law, including lawmakers and leaders. In contrast, rule by law is a concept that seems the governing authority as somehow being above the law and has the power to create and execute law when they find it to be convenient, despite the effect it has on larger freedom and people enjoy. It is true that democracy is not flawless, as an omnipotent or Catholic, for there is no simple solution to all kinds of difficulties. Democratization as a sort of socialization is rarely linear process. It will take even a longer time in order to build up a democratic culture and a socialization process for genuine democracy. In other words, democratic participation is either learned or taught from the social and school education. Now I would like to invite Honorable Zheng Yongquan, President of WLFD, Republic of China, to deliver a speech. Honorable Zheng, please.
各位贵宾，大家好。首先，感谢大家拨冗参加2022世盟国际自由民主视讯论坛。本次视讯论坛的主题是自由、民主和法治。我们都知道，自由和民主相依相随，在自由民主的核心，不可或缺的就是法治的精神。德国的哲学家康德曾经说过，没有民主的法治是空的，没有法治的民主是瞎的，证明了民主与法治有密不可分的关系。唯有实行法治的民主，民主才能健全的发展，在危机中坚持不懈， 以包容对话，消弭社会的分歧，减少冲突的发生。
Good evening, distinguished panelists. First, I want to thank you for your time and participation in 2022 WLFD International Forum on the theme of freedom, democracy, and rule of law. As you all are aware, freedom and democracy are interdependent. At the core of liberal democracy, what is indispensable is the spirit of rule of law. Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, said before, law without democracy is empty. Lawless democracy is blind. Democracy and rule of law has made an inseparable relationships. Democracy can develop soundly and preserving in a crisis, reduce conflict, only if it is implement democracy under the rule of law.
台湾已经在今年10月开放了边境，结束了2年多的和国际阻隔的状态。入境台湾不再需要居家检疫，期盼边境解封之后，疫情能够稍微趋缓。在疫情期间，以防疫为由牵制自由的措施，以及合理化的侵犯人权的行为，能够得到疏解和恢复。
Taiwan has opened its borders in October this year, ending longer than 2 years of isolation from the world. Home quarantine is no longer required to enter Taiwan. We are looking forward to the unblocking of borders, and the epidemic can gradually slow down. During the epidemic, measures to suppress freedom and rationalize human rights violations can be alleviated and restored on the ground of epidemic prevention.
台湾受到国际情势及本土疫情的因素，台经院预测2022年台湾经济成长率向下修正为 3.81%。国际货币基金组织 IMF 10月最新发布的世界经济展望报告认为，超过1/3的全球经济体将在2022年或2023年出现萎缩。我们生活在充满挑战的时期，俄乌战争持续的僵持，通货膨胀居高不下，各国加速紧缩货币政策，新冠疫情改变原有的消费模式，在这个动荡的阶段，凸显了自由和民主的重要性。
This year is affected by the factors such as international situation and local epidemic. Taiwan Institute of Economic Research, TIER, forecast the year 2022 Taiwan economic growth rate revised down to 3.81%. And the International Monetary Fund, IMF, latest report on the World Economic Outlook believes that more than 1/3 of the global economy will shrink in 2022 or 2023. Our life is full of challenges. Russia-Ukrainian war continues. Inflation remains high. Countries accelerate monetary tighten policy. COVID-19 epidemic has changed the original consumption pattern. During this turbulent period, also highlighted the importance of liberal democracy and peace.
中华民国始终坚定地捍卫自由民主。自由之家 Freedom House 10月18号公布了2022年全球网络自由报告，针对全球70个国家或地区网络自由度的进行调查，台湾以79分名列全球第5名， 亚洲第一名，我们一贯的坚定的自由民主的信念，在各领域持续的成长，是引以为荣、为骄傲的事情。
The Republic of China has always firmly defended freedom and democracy. Freedom House 2022 Global Internet Freedom Report, released on October 18th, a survey of internet freedom in 70 countries around the world. Taiwan ranks 5th with 79 points, and first in Asia. We have always firmly believed in freedom and continue to grow in various fields. Democracy, that we are proud.
最后，再次的感谢各位博龙参加2022世盟国际自由民主视讯论坛。相信各位在讨论论坛中精辟的见解和建言，对自由、民主、法治及世界和平都带来正面的影响。谢谢大家。
Finally, thank you again for taking the time to participate in the video forum. I believe in your incisive insights and suggestions will bring positive impact on liberal democracy, rule of law, and world peace. Thank you. Next, I will invite Dr. Huang to deliver a speech. Dr. Huang, please.
Thank you very much. Especially thank you for the organizers for inviting me to this very meaningful conference on the important issue of democracy, freedom, and values. So my name is Huang. I would like to talk about a very important issue in modern democracies, that is the impact of fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. Hereafter, I'm going to call them FMD. As all of you have known, the Republic of China, established on January 1st, 1912, as the first and only Chinese democracy in history, has been struggling both with the Beijing authorities for sovereignty and with fake news, misinformation, and disinformation, FMD. And the government on both sides of the Taiwan Strait have been competing in many issue areas. The lack of political foundation for meaningful dialogue between Taipei and Beijing since May 2016, as well as obvious Washington-Beijing strategic competition since, say, early 2018, have further destabilized cross-Taiwan Strait relations. Their military standoff and diplomatic battles between Taipei and Beijing are most commonly seen by foreigners. Nonetheless, what lies at the core of the cross-strait relations or cross-strait struggle is the competition between two different political economic systems and the ways of life. The Republic of China, commonly known as Taiwan, began its democratic reforms in the mid-1980s. Not a fully fledged democracy yet, Taiwan has still been praised around the world as a beacon of democracy among Chinese communities. I truly believe that Taiwan can play an influential role in mainland China's political reforms if the consolidation of democracy in Taiwan can continue with the effective rule of law and checks and balances mechanisms, which I think are decaying in modern Taiwan. In addition to such a critical issue about Taiwan's survival, I think Taiwan's democracy, a pillar for Taiwan being recognized and endorsed by the free international community, has been threatened by FMD that could come not only from the Chinese Communist authorities, but also from organizations and people on Taiwan or elsewhere over the world. to defend Taiwan from the Beijing authorities' attempt aimed at unifying Taiwan under the so-called one country, two systems formula, it goes beyond a doubt that the ability to keep from the negative influence of FMD has become as at least the same important as the defense and economic capabilities for Taiwan's continued democratization. And I think in such a democracy in Taiwan, multiple values and multiple ideas are being protected and upheld. And also, I think we have seen a great deal of the institutional competition between Taiwan and mainland China, as mentioned earlier, and that's what is happening now. And ladies and gentlemen, a democracy like Taiwan can enjoy higher resilience that results from political institutionalization, economic openness, and robustness, as well as a free civil society independent of the governments and or political parties. However, FMD could enlarge hostility between people or between organizations. FMD could hamper political discourse and cause a lower level of healthy social political participation of the ROC citizens, all of which would lead to decreased resilience of Taiwan. Not to mention that ill references and confusion associated with the FMD could discourage Taiwan's public to access more reliable sources of information that is needed. Then an immediate question that comes into my mind is, how will Taiwan sustain its democracy and political institution when facing a dual sabotage by FMD? What I mean by dual sabotage of FMD means, first, sabotage from within and sabotage from outside, mainly from mainland China. Possible answers to this question can be valuable for all democracies really concerned. So maybe my first tentative answer to my question is media literacy. Media literacy education is a must. It is a very helpful tool for the avoidance of FMD. But, ladies and gentlemen, it takes time, even in Taiwan. So eventually, and hopefully, most of the general public will be able to distinguish between FMD and fact-based opinions or assessments in a more professional way in the future if media literacy education can be continued in Taiwan. And second tentative answer to my above-mentioned question is an open administration with independent agencies, usually independent from the executive branch. And these independent agencies should respond to the expectations of the general public and autonomous civil society organizations with fair, but not necessarily neutral, professionals and community leaders. And I think these are key to managing the FMD issues in Taiwan. And my last but not least tentative answer to that question is the importance of protection of freedom of speech and of information on the basis of the rule of law must not be violated by the government, which I think is a very urgent call in Taiwan. And I think also, meantime, the flow of information that could divide the society, threaten public order, or hinder policy implementations should be monitored or regulated by both the government and by the independent civil society institutions. For example, the government should get rid of controversial rules for online content regulation, even if the decision can be made jointly by the government agencies and social media provider, because any decision that is reached so quickly by both the governments and social media providers could be some damage to the protection of freedom of speech and freedom of information. And also, I think the government should avoid using the term FMD, fake news, misinformation, disinformation, to charge its domestic opponents and skeptics. I think that's very important. So, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, a lot of governments in the world, including the Republic of China government, are still trying to look for a balance between regulation of FMD and the protection of freedom of speech and of information, either seriously or similarly. At the bottom of it all is transparency in related policy making and implementation, sufficient and nonpartisan public discourse, as well as an effort to prevent concerns about freedom of speech and of information from being raised noticeably. Also important is the ability of the public that can tell constructive news and views from FFD so that it is less likely that the government will infringe on the constitutional rights by judging what FMD is from a pro-government point of view only. So I think my introductory remarks will end here, and thank you very much for your listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Huang. Thank you for your analysis and briefing of what Taiwan ROC has been struggling against the fake news, misinformation, and disinformation from domestic and outside. Well, through media literacy education, independent agencies, rule of law, freedom of speech, together with transparency to policy making or implementation, will help to make the general public be able to distinguish the truth or false. I cannot agree more with your viewpoint. Thank you, Dr. Huang. The following, I will invite Honorable Judy Seguro. Send us the virtual message. Honorable Seguro, please.
Pleased to bring greetings on behalf of the Liberal Caucus and Prime Minister Trudeau to the World League for Freedom and Democracy. I congratulate you on the very important work that you continue to do to fight everywhere for freedom and democracy. We look at what is happening in Iran and the fight that the Iranian people are putting up so that they could have a little piece of what we enjoy here in Canada, which is freedom and democracy. To all my friends in Taiwan and around the world, please keep up the great work that you're doing. It's critically important, and I'm pleased to join you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your virtual message and your continuing support of our government, Republic of China on Taiwan. Thanks again. The next, we'll listen to Honorable Yuna Martins. Her message, please.
On behalf of the Senate of Canada, I'm delighted to extend my warmest greetings to all those participating in the 2022 World League for Freedom and Democracy International Virtual Forum. Today's forum brings together participants from around the world to share their knowledge and expertise. This year's theme, Freedom, Democracy, and the Rule of Law, is fitting as we work together to strengthen a community of peace and shared values. Together, we can ensure that a person's right to freedom and democracy is protected. I'd like to acknowledge the leadership and dedication of the World League for Freedom and Democracy, who work tirelessly to advocate for democracy and support individuals worldwide to protect their right to freedom. Best wishes for a memorable event.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate your friendship and we will treasure your friendship and your presentation. Thanks again. The following, I would like to invite Honorable Kira Rudik from Ukrainian Parliament to say a few words to us. Please.
Dear friends from the World League of Freedom and Democracy, I am Kira Rudik, member of Ukrainian Parliament, leader of the Holos Party, and Vice President of ALDE. It's 8.5 months since Russia started full-scale invasion on my country. And at the very beginning, nobody believed that it is possible to stand up to the enemy that is larger and more powerful than you. My country and my nation has proven all the skeptics wrong, because we are still standing, we are fighting back, and we have united the whole world behind us. There are a couple of lessons that we learned during this war. The first is that unity is important. It is so critical that democratic countries are supporting each other and making sure that they stand together. Second is you are responsible for your own fate. You will be getting the support only when you show the willingness to fight and to die for the liberal democratic values as we are. The third, you need to be ready for everything. Today there were 50 missiles and drones hitting Ukrainian infrastructure. And right now, over 80% of Kyiv, where I live, people do not have water supplies, electricity. And this winter will be extremely hard and complicated for us. However, we are not afraid. However, we are not giving up. We are going to be fighting, we are going to be standing, and we encourage all the democratic nations of the world to keep the unity and to keep the support. We all know the price that we are putting on the words liberty, on the words freedom, on the words democracy. In our case, this price is our own lives. But this price can be also a unified support for which I'm so grateful from our allies. Thank you so much, and glory to Ukraine.
The war against Russian invasion shows Ukrainian people's patriotism and determination. Hope the war will be over soon and peaceful prevail. Thank you again. Thank you for your presentation. Next, we would like to invite Honorable Rose Barnes from Guam.
Buenas and Hafa from Guam. Thank you for inviting me to speak here at the 2022 World League for Freedom and Democracy International Virtual Forum. It is a privilege to join you virtually here in my office in our historic Guam Congress building, Hinagatnya, Guam, the center of government in our island. Not many know why the Guam Congress building is historic. From the outside, our Guam Congress building is a modest, mid-century modern building built in 1949 right after World War II. During the reconstruction of Guam, it was the first municipal buildings to be built after our city of Hagåtña was leveled by the bombardment of World War II during the Battle of Guam. It housed the rulemaking body as well as the judiciary. The building represents Guam's early days as a fledgling democracy under the banner of the United States. But most importantly for our island, this building represents so much more than where the legislative branch of our government sits. This is where our people took a stance for the rule of law and demanded a representative government for the people of Guam, by the people of Guam. For over 50 years, under the United States, the people of Guam were not given the opportunity to represent themselves. The people of Guam had no voice to rule themselves. We had no true democracy. The transition from a Spanish colonial society to another form of government mystified many in Guam. While the people of Guam attempted to put their destiny into their own hands by electing their own governor, The United States instead instilled a naval governor and placed the island under indefinite martial law. While some naval governors ruled justly and had sympathy for our political position, others used their power to institute laws as arbitrary as to tell women how long their skirts can be, to as draconian as private land condemnations. The broad authority the naval government had over the people of Guam and our island only grew frustration, anger, and discontent in our island. The people of Guam did not sit on their feelings towards the naval governor. They understood the power of their voices and made it clear that they wanted greater political will. So, for nearly 50 years, the people of Guam came together collectively over and over again to petition Congress and the President of the United States for political rights and democracy. Their tireless work and advocacy for democracy and the rule of law, ultimately to be led by themselves, had brought new changes. It pressured the naval governor to create the first Guam Congress in 1917. It was an incredible leap forward in Guam's self-governance. However, the first Guam Congress had no rulemaking powers. They served as advisors appointed by the naval governor. Growing tired of this system, the Guam Congress demanded for true democracy and U.S. citizenship, believing that more liberty and rights would be granted if we were made American citizens. They routed petitions island-wide requesting Congress enact legislation that would give the people of Guam U.S. citizenship and political rights. The people of Guam sent 2 delegates to Washington, D.C. to request for legislation to be enacted by Congress. But the petition was not acted on, and the visit was not successful at first. After a grueling 3 years under enemy occupation during World War II, the Guam Congress sent another resolution to Congress in 1947 demanding for democracy. This got more attention by Congress. In 1948, the naval governor at that time finally gave the people of Guam the authority to create laws for themselves. Guam was a step closer toward full democracy and leading with the rule of law. However, the naval governor still passed new controversial laws without the Guam Congress and still acted with disregard of the people of Guam and the authority of the Guam Congress. Discontent continued to grow. It wasn't until the naval governor Pauno intervened in a subpoena issued by the Guam Congress of an American citizen operating a business in Guam in a contravention of local laws. This intervention by the naval governor only questioned the full authority of the Guam Congress. Was it not an equal branch to the naval governor? Or did the naval governor still have ultimate authority over the island? Angered by their actions by the naval governor, the Guam Congress let their ultimatum. They unanimously voted to adjourn indefinitely until the United States Congress acted on legislation to establish full civilian self-government in Guam, ending martial law. The swift ending of this branch of government and this form of democracy in the island of Guam reached the newspaper in Hawaii and eventually the nation, ushering the passage of the Organic Act of 1950, finally instituting a civilian government in Guam. They were successful. Democracy prevailed over the might of the United States naval government, and democracy will always prevail as long as the people speak up for it. In Guam's case, for 50 years, the people missed one of the most important key elements to any democracy, the fourth branch of government, the news media, the branch that keeps all of us accountable. They make sure powers are in check and shine a light when the rule of law isn't followed. That day, the national media ran the story of the Guam Congress walkout, and the nation was pressured to act. The Guam Congress walkout occurred on March 5th, 1949, here in the Guam Congress building. This is what makes the building historical and special to all of us. This historic event showed how important the rule of law is and that no one is above the law, not even a naval governor. It showed how fragile democracy can be if we don't uphold the rule of law that we are governed by. But it also showed how quickly democracy can be fully restored when the people demanded and everyone placed their role to protect democracy. The Guam Congress walkout closed the deliberative rulemaking branch in protest of the lack of authority they had. They shut out the illusion of democracy in pursuit of a full civilian-led democracy. The Guam Congress sent a clear message to the nation: follow the rule of law or democracy dies. The message was clearly received. After the end of the Spanish colonial era in Guam, the people only wanted one thing: democracy, and the people of Guam demanded it for 50 years. The people of Guam finally got it. We achieved full citizenship and a civilian democracy thanks to those before us who fought for it. While we in Guam are still working on our right to self-determination, the legacy of our democracy won't be forgotten in Guam. The legacy of democracy in Guam is thanks to the brave men and women who signed the petitions, traveled to Washington, D.C., and stood up against naval powers to tell the United States that we are also deserving of a civilian-led democracy and we are entitled to the same liberties as every American. And you must follow the rule of law as well to protect democracy. We are very proud of their accomplishments. As Vice Speaker of the 36th Guam Legislature, I have served in a body that has remained committed to the rule of law for 70 years. 70 years have passed since we restored our island to a civilian-led democracy. We restored the liberties that we enjoy today and greater peace and mutual collaboration with other democracies in our region. The people of Guam intend to uphold the rule of law and keep the democracy that we fought hard for. With this year's theme on freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, I wanted to share Guam's pursuit of democracy. Through peaceful protests, acts of resistance, and with the help of the fourth branch of government, the media, the people of Guam received limited self-governance. I am happy to join you all here because from their legacy, it is now my duty and all our duties to protect democracy. Thank you. Si Diyos masi, si Diyos ang binidisi hamzu todos, dyan sana masi.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your sharing the legacy of Guam's people to pursue democracy. Sure, it is a long way to go for the whole story of political development from naval governor to Guam's Congress. Thanks again. The following, I would like to invite Honorable Bruce Knott. Give us some remarks, please.
Hello, I am honored to once again speak to the World League of Freedom and Democracy. Since my husband and I attended our first meeting of the World League of Freedom and Democracy in 2015, we've seen the levels of freedom and democracy decline at alarming rates around the world. The Republic of China, Taiwan remains an example and a beacon of hope that freedom and democracy can survive and give the people of the world a safe and dignified life. When I was the executive director of the Unitarian Universalist United Nations office, we presented an award to the government of Norway for their outstanding work in promoting human rights, especially sexual orientation and gender identity human rights. It took some time to convince the government of Norway that we didn't expect anything in return from them. We simply wanted to acknowledge the consistent funding and advocacy of the government of Norway in promoting human rights and the inherent worth and dignity of us all. It turned out that it was the Norwegian ambassador to the United States that accepted the award. There are many countries that deserve honorable mention. Here are a few that I believe, together with the Republic of China, Taiwan, are working to preserve freedom and democracy. In addition to Norway, they include Ireland, Guam, Ukraine, Australia, Austria, Barbados, Belgium, Bhutan, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Iceland, Japan, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Netherlands, New Zealand, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, South Africa, South Korea, Tuvalu, United Kingdom, and Uruguay. This is not a complete list, but it shows that freedom and democracy is alive and flourishing across the world in countries big and small, with every ethnic group and religion. What's sad are those countries that are less democratic and free than they used to be. These, unfortunately, include my country, the United States, Russia, Poland, Turkey, the Philippines, India, Venezuela, Zambia, Ethiopia, Hungary, China, People's Republic of China, that is, Italy, Syria, Israel, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Thailand, the Gambia, Uganda, United Arab Emirates, and Ghana, and too many more nations are succumbing to authoritarianism. I have long observed that we need to dismantle many hierarchies: white supremacy, religious nationalism, English language supremacy, patriarchy, and much more. Patriarchy oppresses both women and all of us. It is not only by dismantling patriarchy that we can breathe free and be judged. It's only by dismantling patriarchy that we can breathe free and be judged only by the content of our character. I used to visit Ghana when I met people in Ghana. I met with the LGBT advocates who were slowly making Ghana a more tolerant nation. I also spoke to senior political leaders in Ghana about sexual orientation, gender identity issues. But I've not been to Ghana since 2017. Ghana is about ready to enact the world's worst anti-LGBTIQ law, which seeks to imprison all those who are LGBT and all those who speak on their behalf. This law and many like it in the United States and around the world are funded, written, and promoted by religious nationalists, in this case, Christian nationalists. They are gaining ground while we watch and do very little to confront this threat to basic human rights. We must counter the very aggressive and well-resourced forces of autocratic religious nationalism, which seeks to destroy human rights, democracy, diversity, and inclusion. These are the folks that make it a crime to say gay. They ban books and won't allow the discussion of slavery and what was done to indigenous people around the world, because telling the truth might disturb some bigot's sense of superiority. The People's Republic of China, which is a secular state, has communist political philosophy which resembles intolerant religion, in that they demand belief in their system and perfect obedience to their orders. There is no freedom and democracy in autocratic systems such as exist in the People's Republic of China. In 2008, the United Nations was planning a conference in Paris to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The UN planned to discuss the human rights of just about everyone: men and women and the Dalits in India, the Roma in Europe, everybody except LGBTIQ people. I raised my hand and asked, what about the human rights of LGBTIQ people? I was told, we'll take that under advisement. I kept asking the question week after week, and I recruited allies. Finally, I was given the first ever workshop on LGBTIQ plus issues in any conference like the one we had in Paris. My workshop in Paris was well attended, including a Swedish diplomat who told me that the European Union planned to present a draft resolution at the UN General Assembly calling on the end of violence and discrimination against people based on their sexual orientation and gender identity. Later, I was invited to speak at a much larger breakout session by Sister Joan Kirby, who was a Catholic and Buddhist nun. After that speech, a Catholic Monsignor told me that he was gay and he supported everything I was doing. When I returned to New York, I worked with many others at the Norwegian mission to the UN to ensure that the UN General Assembly draft resolution succeeded. It did. In 2015, I got a call from one of the lawyers representing the family of Tamir Rice. And you may know that Tamir was a 12-year-old boy playing alone in a park. Timothy Lohman, a white police officer, drove up to Tamir and shot and killed him with no warning. The lawyer wanted me to know what we could do to host an event at the UN to highlight police brutality. I said, of course. I mentioned that we might expect a small event with about 50 people. Then another lawyer called and said he knew Harry Belafonte. I said, oh, well, if you know Harry Belafonte, then we're going to have a much bigger event. It was. 500 people were in the audience, and the event was live webcast worldwide on UN Web TV. I called Harry Belafonte UN royalty. Belafonte thanked me for my warm embrace. He was magnificent. Alicia Garza from Black Lives Matter was also a featured speaker. The High Commissioner for Human Rights and a host of other luminaries were there. We launched the UN Decade of People of African Descent. This was not an easy event to stage. We got pushback from the American mission to the UN, who feared that we were picking on the United States too much. The UN didn't have the money to send a car to pick up Harry Belafonte and his wife, both of advanced age, so I paid for the car service. In the end, the event was an enormous success, and the UN Decade of People of African Descent at the UN continues and will until 2025. Finally, I did what I could to help Taiwan become the only nation in Asia to enact legal recognition of same-sex marriage. I began as the chair of the Department of Public Information Executive Committee, which represents 2,000 NGOs at the UN affiliated with the Department of Public Information, which has changed its name now to the Department of Global Communications. I was invited to speak at a huge event sponsored by the World League of Freedom and Democracy. I went with my husband, and together we met with the President of the Republic of China, Taiwan, and I advocated for same-sex marriage in my speech and in my conversations with the President, Foreign Minister, and many others in Taiwan. I talked with LGBTIQ activists in Taiwan. I spoke with Master Chen Yen, Dharma Master of the Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation. She made it clear that she wanted to stay out of politics, and she asked me not to say that she was either for or against same-sex marriage. I agreed, but I said, can I tell people that you and your entire Tzu Chi Foundation have been gracious and kind to both me and my husband? She said yes, and I did. I also told people that actions speak louder than words. Over the course of years, I've met with members of the Taiwanese National Assembly. I met with clergy who were for, against, and neutral about same-sex marriage. The Presbyterian Church of Taiwan, which is more conservative than it is in the United States, fostered a referendum on same-sex marriage, which resulted in a majority voting against same-sex marriage. There were demonstrations against me and my husband, people shouting, "We are not guinea pigs. Don't experiment on this." I gave a speech here at the World League of Freedom and Democracy, which was instantly front-page news in all the major publications. I said you can't vote on human rights. The majority will always vote against the minority. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we are all born free and equal in dignity and rights, and those rights can't be voted away by the majority. Later, when the Taiwan National Assembly debated same-sex marriage, many referred to the results of the national referendum on same-sex marriage. Others quoted me saying that you can't vote away the rights of a minority. The motion passed, and Taiwan is the only nation in Asia that has same-sex marriage. Taiwan's democracy is an example for the world. Nations which protect the rights of their people regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity generally protect the rights of all of their people. Those nations which oppress people based on their sexual orientation or gender identity generally oppress all their people. Charlie Clemens, former head of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, said, "Bruce, you were the right person at the right place at the right time." That's my story. I see an opportunity and I seize it when it happens to appear. I network, build support, and do my best to persevere with patience, persistence, and professionalism. However, if the time isn't right and I'm not the right person in the right place at the right time, then I'm just an advocate doing my best. However, if I happen to be the right person at the right place at the right time, I seem to have the ability to accomplish advancements of lasting importance. You can do this too. Keep awake. Be alert to opportunities to make a difference. Even when the time is not right, stay engaged and be ready when your time comes to make history. Together, we can change the world for the better. No person can ever do this work alone. We all need allies, help, advisors, and mentors. Let's do this for each other as we work together to create the beloved community. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Actually, I'll tell you that I agree that we can vote on human rights. You mentioned that in your speech. But to me, it's a kind of vote facts and the other choice value. I value something that is your value standard, what you want to do. But it's not a fact. Even if it is a fact, it's a man or a woman. David is a man, you are a man, whatever. You cannot by vote say you are not a man. The truth is true. Truth is always there. This is a very interesting subject. And as you say that, you cannot decide by a majority rule. For the majority, we always vote against the minority. That's very true. Very, very true. Thanks for your opinion. Thank you for your note. Following, I would invite Mr. Fabrizio Bazzato. Mr. Bazzato, please.
Thank you very much. Greetings from Japan. It is indeed a honor and a pleasure to be invited to speak and reach virtually so many parts of the world tonight. I have the distinct honor of serving as a diplomat for the Sovereign Order of Malta, whose full name, official name, is the Sovereign Military Hospitaller Order of St. John of Jerusalem, of Rhodes, and of Malta. Such a long name reflects the long history of the order that covers almost a millennium. The order is a lay Catholic order endowed with international public law personality, which has been sovereign since the 11th century. As such, the order has diplomatic relations with 112 countries, is at the UN as a permanent observer, just like the Holy See, and is a force for good, conducting a humanitarian diplomacy and managing 120 humanitarian projects in every continent. I would like to elaborate on what my predecessors, my fellow distinguished speakers, said, starting from the motto of the order that enshrines the mission of all members and volunteers of the order. The order has more than 13,000 members and about 100,000 volunteers. Our motto is to issue fidei, and obsequium pauperum, it is Latin, which means defense of the faith and care for the poor, the sick, the needy, the vulnerable. Well, on January 6, 1941, the American President Franklin Delano Roosevelt delivered a State of the Union speech that subsequently came to be known as the Four Freedoms speech. Those four freedoms are the freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, the freedom from want, and the freedom from fear. Indeed, my fellow distinguished speakers, in their compelling talks tonight, highlighted the importance of all the four freedoms. Freedom of speech is certainly the freedom of asserting a community or individual democratic and human rights, like it happened in Guam with the Congress walkout, and like it happens every day when we uphold those values. Freedom of worship. Freedom of worship doesn't mean the freedom to proclaim one's faith only. It also means the freedom to worship in the name of love, peace, truth, brotherhood of human beings, and right to life. Freedom from want is at the center of the order's action. The order caters to the forgotten people, to those who are on the margin of society, those who are hungry, those who are cold, those who are sick, those who are displaced, the refugees, like it is the case in Ukraine and also in many other European countries where Ukrainian refugees are welcome and protected. Freedom for fear. Fear from persecution because of one's nationality, ethnicity, sexual identity, and also freedom, as my good friend Bruce Knott said, from police brutality, freedom from violence. It is also freedom from lies. As the first speaker said, we should make sure that the people are not deceived by fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. Upholding freedom and democracy ultimately is up to each of us. And I would like to conclude my talk with a quote from John Fitzgerald Kennedy, another great US president. And I quote, "For in democracy, every citizen, regardless of his interest in politics, holds office. Every one of us is in a position of responsibility. And in the final analysis, the kind of government we get depends upon how we fulfill those responsibilities. We, the people, are the boss. And we will get the kind of political leadership, be it good or bad, that we demand or deserve." Thank you very much for your attention and patience.
seems to me that we can discuss more about your organizations. It lasts about 1,000 years, longer than history record. In the past almost 1,000 years, I know this is a philanthropy. It's a kind of a relations, international relations, and as also a tool for humanitarian aid or help or assistance to those people or those countries in dangers or suffering. So tell me more about, shed more light about this, that sphere of what you have done in your actually is not in your order, ORD order. Please.
Exists to facilitate its mission to help the sick, the poor, the vulnerable, regardless of their ethnicity, religious persuasion, age, gender, all over the world. It was the case at the very beginning of the history of the order. It is even more the case today. The order is active in all continents, from Mauritania to Cambodia, from Ukraine to South Africa, from the United States to Italy. The diplomacy of the order, which is impartial, neutral, and apolitical, exists to serve the mission of the order. As such, the order strives to expand its activities, action, and to reach those communities that are more vulnerable and more in need of immediate assistance. What the order is doing and has done since the onset of the conflict in Ukraine is, I believe, remarkable. And is remarkable because of the remarkable people and the remarkable volunteers that being selflessly giving their time, their strength, their energy, their money to help people that was in want and in fear. The order upholds the value of peace among nations, among people. If you are interested in knowing more about the order's humanitarian effort, we have a very well-structured website, www.orderofmalta.int. I wholeheartedly invite each of you to visit it, and in case you would like to have more information, please contact me. Our friends of the World League of Freedom and Democracy will be very happy to share my contact details with you. Thank you.
I ask you one more about the fund or contribution. I know, seems like you cannot collect tax. There's no tax for your order. But how can you maintain your economic survive? It's such a kind of 1,000 years long.
It's not completely. It's not completely true that we cannot collect tax, because members pay a membership fee and give substantial donations to the order. But the order is financially independent in the sense that it has a long history, so it has its own assets from which it can draw to fund its humanitarian projects and initiatives, but also the order receives donations from private and without any strings attached from governments. For example, the order in Germany receives funds from the government to operate an ambulance service. So that money is immediately put to good use in total transparency. The order's budget is about the order's annual budget is about $2 billion annually. So financial independence is important for the sake of operating freely, but also for the sake of being perceived as a force for good with above partisanism. And in fact, the only side that the order takes is with the poor, the sick, the vulnerable. The order talks to everybody, to every government, but doesn't compromise on its humanitarian values. We will always speak for peace, for justice, and we will never betray our values and humanitarian mission. Thank you very much.
It's about your LGBT, this kind of what everybody acknowledge you. This is kind of is by born, by nature. How is that situation in Africa continent?
Well, I'm not an expert of Africa. Certainly, as I said, the order upholds the right of every human being not to be persecuted, oppressed, and not to be the object of violence because of his or her ethnicity, religious persuasion, sexual orientation, or identity. So certainly, I believe I'm not in a position to speak for the political echelons of the order. I'm a diplomat, but this I can say. Wherever there is somebody who is persecuted and oppressed and lives in fear, in hunger, in need, the order will be there to help.
Thank you. Bruce, what do you think about seems to me that LGBT can be accepted in the society. It's more democratic society. It's easier to accept. But someone in Africa, not so. I didn't mean Africa. Some country less freedom, no liberty, no human freedom. It's very hard to teach or to let them know those people against the LGBT. This is a long way, but especially I mentioned about Africa because some countries less democracy. What's in the future? What do you say on this issue? What do you think?
I think there's definitely a relationship between tolerance of difference. I mean, what we're talking about here is, do we tolerate people that are different than ourselves, or do we insist that everybody has to be the same as we are? And in Africa, one of the best countries in the world is South Africa. LGBT rights are enshrined in their constitution, which is not the case here in the United States. Their laws protecting sexual orientation and gender identity in South Africa are much stronger than they are in the United States, and I would say stronger than they are in many European countries. So South Africa, because it is a very strong democracy, has very strong protections for all of their people, including people based on their sexual orientation, gender identity. Other countries, it varies. And many of the French-speaking countries tend to be more tolerant than some of the former British colonies. And if you go back into British colonialism and you read some of the documents of those times, they talked about their fear of the sexual powers of the darker races. They wanted to suppress the sexuality of people in Africa and also people in Asia. So they had very strong, very Victorian sexuality laws, and made life really difficult for people, based on their sexual orientation, gender identity. France didn't have those kinds of rules. And in fact, even people in the United Kingdom in the Victorian age, if they happened to be gay, such as Oscar Wilde and others, they were often advised to move to France because France was a more tolerant country. So that, within Africa, there are places that are very harsh and those that are not. And I had noticed that Ghana actually was moving in the right direction. It was becoming more tolerant. And what I'm noticing lately is that they've gone back. They've gone in the wrong direction, and they're becoming far less tolerant. I lived in Cote d'Ivoire, which is right next to Ghana. It's the country right adjacent to Ghana, but it is a French-speaking country, a former colony of France. And there are no laws in Cote d'Ivoire that are against sexual orientation or gender identity. It's not necessarily very tolerated. Some people don't like it, but there are no legal laws. You cannot be persecuted by the law in Cote d'Ivoire because of your sexual orientation, gender identity. And then it just becomes something of a matter of, personal preference. I mean, some people have the idea that they embrace diversity and inclusion and want everybody, no matter who they are or who they love, to have the rights. And then there are people that feel that because of their religious beliefs or because of their own personal problems, they want to persecute people. One thing I'll say is that throughout my long life, I'm now 73 years old, so I've lived a while. The problems I've had the worst with people are people that are actually secretly gay. They are what you call down low. So they're having gay relationships clandestinely, but they try to pretend that they're straight, and they gave me the biggest problems. People that are comfortable with their sexuality and heterosexuals that are comfortable with their sexuality generally don't have a problem with me. It's somebody who is pretending to be straight, but secretly on the down low. And when they come in contact with me, they have a fear that somehow I'm going to expose their real life. And you see this in religious groups. You see religions that are condemning homosexuality, and then you look at their ministers or their priests, and they're having sex with men. And so they're hypocrites. They're preaching one thing and they're doing another thing. And people that don't have this hypocrisy and that are very clear about their sexuality usually don't have a problem with me or with anybody else. It's like, okay, you do what you do, I'll do what I do, and we're all okay, fine, together. But it's the people that are living in a hypocritical sort of way that tend to be the most aggressively anti-LGBT. And that certainly is the case in Africa. I know several African men who may be even ministers who condemn homosexuality and then come to find out they're actually doing some of that themselves on the down low.
So hypocrites.
Yes.
I appreciate you give me some hint to tell me that South Africa is enshrined in the Constitution. This is I read from the newspapers before, but I didn't pay attention to that. And your Ivory Coast, you mentioned your French name is different, but in English it's called Ivory Coast, right?
Yeah.
So you know very well about West Africa because you stayed 3 years or 4 years in West Africa.
Yes, I think even longer than that. And I've traveled throughout Africa, both East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa.
My God, Mr.
But I
Africa.
have a lot of experience in West Africa.
Congratulations, you are Mr.
Yeah, I lived in Kenya, I lived in
Oh,
Sudan,
Kenya.
I lived
I
in
see.
Ethiopia, in Somalia, I lived in Zambia. I have a lot of
God.
African experience.
So you deserve everybody call you Mr. Africa.
Yes.
You know Africa so
It's
well.
a great continent. It has a lot of potential. It's very sad that much of the resources of Africa are taken up in fighting and in wars that are unnecessary. And hopefully that, I was just listening to the news this morning about the civil war in Ethiopia with the province of Tigray. That's just a horrible war, and it's causing so much suffering. And Ethiopia had a great future ahead of it. It actually was on the path to great development and a really good future. And then they got themselves wound up in the civil war, and they've ruined a lot, and they've pushed their progress back for decades. It will take a long time to repair the damage that has been done. And so if Africa could just stop fighting, and again, it's basically accepting other people and accepting who they are, and not using violence in order to impose your will on other people. If you just let people be what they want to be, and Tigray, if Tigray wanted to be independent or more independent, let them. It's much better than having a civil war.
Yes, of course, it's much better than civil war. And I think it's very late night right now in Taipei, and our gentleman in Tokyo is after midnight, right, or almost midnight. So I call you Why Not Business today's forum, and thanks for your participating. Thank you very much for your share your opinion or the viewpoint or remarks with us. Thank you very much. Anything you want us to add more, or?
Well, just I would like to express the hope that next year in 2023 will be all
in Taipei.
Get together in Taipei.
Okay, that's my general wish too. Everybody's doing the same thing. Hope the epidemic is stopped as soon as we can, as possible, and then we'll see each other in Taipei in person.
Yes. It's been too long.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
See you in Taipei.
See you in Taipei.
See you in Taipei.